The statements I wanted to put out were watered down. They were controlled. I was told where to go, when to go, what to say. I could never fully express how I felt about what was happening in Palestine. It just made me feel uneasy with my own conscience, and intimidation such as physically being escorted to the Prime Minister's office for a telling off. It almost gave you the vibes of a young, troublesome student being taken by the teacher to the headmaster's office. I thought to myself as I was walking and receiving the glares and stares of random people in the hallways, would this have happened if I was an Anglo-Saxon woman?
Senator Payman, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You crossed the floor to vote with the Greens Party, to support a recognition of the Palestinian state in defiance of your now former Labour Party. You clearly understood the risks of being expelled from the party. You've had a smear campaign by the media and by the Labour Party against you. Today, you resigned from the Labour Party and decided to run for the rest of your term as an independent in the Senate. It sounds like a roller coaster. I'm sure you're very emotional, or I'm sure this is a very emotional time for you. How are you feeling right now?
Thank you so much for the question. And yes, it has been a roller coaster ride. It has been quite an intense journey. It's taken both an emotional toll and I do physically feel worn out as well. But I also want to acknowledge how difficult of a time this has been for my family and also my former staff members who have now moved on. I think there's 4 of them that have moved on now. But in saying that, I think, yes, there's going to be a period where there's massive adjustment that's required. Becoming an independent in, say, my almost third year in the role, it's quite a big shift. But in saying that, I look forward to the challenge. It's going to be an interesting journey. But alhamdulillah, I've got a clear conscience. I feel very blessed that through the strength of my convictions, I was able to uphold the principles and values that I believed in.
Senator Payman, you've been through quite a difficult week. You've had a press conference with some bad-mannered sort of journalists today. How did you maintain your composure? How did you pull through this?
Can you elaborate, Senator, on what the suggestion that you're being guided by God in your decision making, and will you campaign on sort of other Islamic Muslim type of issues?
I don't know how to respond to that question without feeling offended or insulted, that just because I'm a visibly Muslim woman that I would only care about Muslim issues.
My secret is I don't have any fancy media training. It's simply the adhkar that I do and the salawat that I make, but also just praying that, God Almighty uses me as a vessel in the best way that He sees fit. So it was a big pack of journalists and cameramen, but it was, alhamdulillah, I think it went well.
Now, you knew you were going to face potential expulsion from the party for going against the Labour Party position. What made you cross the floor and vote in defiance of your now former Labour Party?
A genocide's taking place. A simple question, a simple answer. 40,000 people have been killed, massacred brutally. And for us to be in a privileged position in a nation that champions human rights, in a nation where people have big dreams of seeing a free world or, advocating for freedom, equality, and justice, for us to just sit back and not do what we can as a middle power that's in the best interest of our nation, but also to establish a independent national foreign policy that isn't bound to another nation, for us to make our own decisions. We had so many opportunities for us to do more than we have. And I think I had to draw a line when it was as simple as, here is a clear mandate, the moral stance for this situation was very simple: recognize the state of Palestine. And back in 2021, the Labor Party had its national conference where it was heavily debated, and within the party platform, it stipulated that the next Labor government should consider recognising the state of Palestine. And we can't now keep talking about a two-state solution, of which one of those states are not recognised, and then expect that that is going to give people hope and solace that we are progressing towards a peace process.
Okay, and what's been the feedback like since, from the wider community and your constituents since resigning from the Labor Party?
I haven't looked at my phone, but I know it's been buzzing. I think even in the lead up to me coming to a decision, there's been a lot of comments, but also sentiments that have been shared with me, not just from my home state of Western Australia, but from New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland, and some even abroad from different countries, encouraging me to continue fighting the good fight and encouraging me to stay strong on my principles. It's that level of integrity that they say they don't see in politics these days. I'm quite fortunate to be in a position where I had to just draw the line and make sure that people out there realise your hands aren't always tied, and that can no longer be an excuse, especially when you're seeing young children going through amputation without anaesthetics or having their legs blown off, and the displacement, the starvation, all the atrocities that we see through social media, through independent journalists who are risking their lives on the ground to make sure that we are given that right to be able to visually see what's happening. You can't unsee those atrocities, and you can't remain silent. You can't just sit back with a clear conscience and say, I've done everything I could.
Now, you've spoken of being exiled and intimidated by your now former Labor colleagues. Can you tell us a little bit about this intimidation?
Look, it was an isolating period where on 15th of May, when I made my statement on calling the atrocities in Palestine a genocide and calling for the government to impose sanctions and divest and exercise a trade halt with Israel, it started manifesting. It was on the day of Nakba, and it just started transforming the way my colleagues interacted with me. I was getting the cold shoulder. I felt like I wasn't involved in those internal conversations. But in saying that, it didn't bother me too much. And it wasn't until I decided to cross the floor last Tuesday that intimidation such as physically being escorted to the Prime Minister's office for a telling off, that I found quite, condescending. It almost gave you the vibes of a young, troublesome student being taken by the teacher to the headmaster's office, because a lot of people were staring and glaring. In addition to that, there's been instances where people have constantly, or my former colleagues would constantly message me, what are you planning on doing? Are you crossing the floor? Are you not crossing the floor? What decision have you made? And in recent articles I've been reading that it's almost like they were ridiculing the fact that I, in confidence, told them that I'm praying and I'm reflecting on my duties as a Muslim, but also as a citizen of this country that values human rights and has a moral compass. Like, this is a big decision whether I should cross the floor or not. And for those colleagues to then go to the media and make it seem like I'm just this fragile, vulnerable young girl who is committing to a higher being, like the article was quite degrading. And I just want to put it out there that just because you're a person of faith doesn't mean that, you don't have principles or that you will impose your beliefs onto others who may not have the same beliefs. But there is room for people of faith. I mean, we start our days in Parliament with the morning prayer. I mean, I read my own prayers, but it's a symbolic moment for us to reflect on our duties to our constituents. And it's been a really difficult but interesting time to actually navigate through this political dynamic.
When you say you were treated like a schoolgirl being taken to the headmaster's office, what did that feel like for you?
It was very patronising and condescending. I thought to myself as I was walking and receiving the glares and, stares of random people in the hallways, would this have happened if I was an Anglo-Saxon woman? I'm not sure if the age is a factor, but it definitely felt very isolating and wasn't the best feeling.
And do you harbour any resentment towards the Labour Party given the way that you were treated?
I wouldn't say I've got resentment. I haven't taken things personally. I just hope that they realise the consequences of their actions and their decisions, and I hope that they will reflect on perhaps reviewing their harsh, I'd say, rules of not allowing backbenchers to raise differences of opinion or for them to accept voices of dissent within their ranks and allow for conscience votes to take place, especially when it doesn't compel to pieces of legislation.
Now, there's been significant media coverage around your position, and you've been subjected to an intense sort of media scrutiny and criticism. Some outlets have called you, have said, calling you a rat within the ranks, rogue, rebel. Others have attempted to discredit your position for previously supporting our own channel, One Path Network. What do you have to say about this media campaign?
Look, it's clearly a smear campaign to discredit what I'm doing or pigeonhole me into a Muslim senator who only cares about Muslim issues. That isn't a case. When I pledged to be the voice of West Australians, Western Australia is a massive state with a diversity of people who've got different views on things. And for me to come in and want to, represent their voices, I need to be cognizant about those views. So for media outlets out there to just pick and choose without the broader context and timelines of when things have happened is just poor journalism.
You initially made history as the first Australian hijabi parliamentarian, and you were celebrated for being an Afghan-born migrant who became senator at the young age of 27. Anthony Albanese has stated, and I quote, "Our diversity is our strength." Yet after crossing the floor, you boldly stated that you were not elected as a token representative of diversity. Now, do you believe that the Labour Party's approach to diversity is inconsistent?
Yes, there has been inconsistencies, and there's been instances where I've been sent to international delegations to paint a particular picture of Australia. I've also been utilised as damage control when an electorate office has sent a pro-Israeli standard response to a Muslim Palestinian family who's grieving the loss of dozens of family members in Gaza. So it's those situations where I feel like I'm only there to serve a particular purpose rather than actually accepting the voice of dissent that I brought to the table and said, you know what, this is a line I'm drawing and you cannot have multiculturalism and the diversity without the diversity of views and not respect those views and allow them to make stances like perhaps crossing the floor and voting on their conscience, we aren't a homogenous society, and you can't have me look the way I am but sound like a sixth generation, Anglo-Saxon Australian. So it's very important for that diversity to be implemented in the structures that we see around us, whether it be in the workforces, in the policies, or in the way we handle the diversity of views that we bring to the table.
As the youngest woman in Australian Parliament at the moment, do you believe your voice was silenced?
Yes, in the last, I would say, 6 to 7 months since 7th of October, I felt that the statements I wanted to put out were watered down. They were controlled. I was told where to go, when to go, what to say. I could never fully express how I felt about what was happening in Palestine, the grief that was engulfing our communities here and abroad. It just made me feel uneasy with my own conscience. And my father, Allah yarhamu, would always say that if you have a clear conscience, you wouldn't fear a thing in the world, because you know that your accountability is with your Lord. And for me, that's a big principle of, whatever action I take, I should be accountable for it, whether it's accountable to the voters that have voted me in, the people's voices that I represent in the communities, or the private actions through my faith that I conduct myself in a way that is to seek the pleasure of God and make sure that we're doing right by Him. It's definitely been a difficult past few months, to say the least, and a challenging time, but nevertheless, I look forward to being that independent voice for Western Australia, but also the communities that look up to me, because there's a lot more hope in the way we are shifting towards that level of independence and understanding that, we are not confined by the boundaries that parties have perhaps practiced, or the discipline or caucus solidarity that they abide by for 130 odd years.
Have you lost confidence in the Australian parliamentary system?
That's a big statement. I would say there's hope in the younger generation utilising the resources in at their disposal to really understand, educate themselves about our political system, and find ways of ensuring that there is representation in all levels, so that's local level, state and federal, to put their hand up, whether that may be as an independent candidate or as part of a party that their values align with. And it's clear that we're seeing a shift towards perhaps more independence. The two-party system seems to not be as effective in governing, but also in the way it's silencing voices of dissent within its own ranks, and depriving the voices of rank and file members and those on grassroots level to really reach the top. We are here to represent people on the ground, and that needs to happen when you can fully represent people without perhaps strings attached or having restrictions and boundaries by your party.
Okay, so speaking of this, there is a collective feeling of disappointment within the Muslim community. I mean, even that of betrayal towards the Labour Party specifically, given their silence towards the Palestinian issue. And this is very prominent in electorates where Muslims hold a large percentage of the constituents who are being ignored by their elected representatives. What is stopping members of parliament from standing up with their communities?
something I alluded to earlier. It could be caucus solidarity, feeling like their hands are tied and they must go with the collective decision. But I do concur. There has been many communities out there who've reached out to me, not just within the Muslim community, but many others who have shown that they are not really happy with the way their local Labor representative is conducting themselves. And I don't know how that rage and anger is going to manifest when we hit the polls, when the Prime Minister calls the election. But I know that the mobilisation that I'm seeing and I'm hearing about, there's serious action and people really want to understand the political system so they can use that democratic right to vote in a constructive way.
So what's your message to these Labor politicians who are in electorates that are sort of have constituents who care about the Palestinian issue that yet they're silent? What's your message to them?
I'd say you pledge to be the voice of your constituents and to represent them. It would be important and remiss of them to ignore those voices and ignore those sentiments on the ground. This has now become not just a matter that impacts electorates, but the nation as a whole. And if you can't stand up for human rights, for justice, for freedom, and have integrity as part of your value system, people are going to lose that trust in you as their local representative. And sooner or later, they would even think about replacing you.
Now, there's so much footage of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese previously making hardline statements against, Israeli war crimes and condemning the illegal occupation, the brutal occupation. To now see the Prime Minister take, a completely drastic turn in relations to softening his message towards Israel, do you feel like he's let Palestine down? I mean, it's been quoted that he's put more sanctions on you than on Netanyahu. What is your message to the Australian Prime Minister?
I think those private conversations with the Prime Minister that I've previously had, I've made clear what I think about just his advocacy in this space. I know that, and he's told me that he's advocated for Palestine longer than I've been on this earth for. And to that, I would say, well, let's implement it. Let's make it count when it matters the most. People are looking up to the leaders that we currently have, and they want to see that strong leadership to take a side, to see what the Prime Minister is going to do. I think there's been an indiscrepancy in the way one group has been treated over the other, and we can't truly say that we are a people of fairness and equality if we're going to, cause disunity within the community by treating one different to another. That's what breaks the fabric of our society. That's what is causing the social cohesion issues. That's what's making people feel like they're not being heard. And there is a simple solution to that. Listen to the people who voted you in.
Okay. Now, it's no secret that there are thousands of young Muslim girls that look up to you, all dreaming of hoping that they can make a difference to this world. When you were elected, you stated that hope is an amazing thing. Given what you've been through to date, do you still have that same message of hope? And what is your message to these young girls?
I definitely have the same message of hope. If I can give myself the audacity as a daughter of a refugee who wasn't even born here to challenge the system and to stay true to my conscience and to stay true to my principles, then I know any other girl out there, any other, whether they, be a hijabi Muslim woman, young or old, you can do it too. It's that message of hope, but also give yourself that confidence and that audacity to challenge the status quo. Don't just comply. Don't just be comfortable or not want to push out of your comfort zone, because change doesn't happen when we're comfortable.
Okay. Now, you dedicated your first opening address in the Senate to your late father, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him. If your father, Abdul Wakil, was to see you in this position today, forced to leave your party, standing up for what you believe in, saying things like, you know, with a heavy heart but a clear conscience, what would his advice be to you today?
I think he would advise me to continue on this path of maintaining a clear conscience and standing firm to my convictions and my principles, because when you have that integrity in your life and the way you approach things, you won't go wrong. So there's always a moral compass when it comes to making decisions, and it's important for us to renew those intentions and know why we're doing what we're doing.
Okay. Senator Payman, what does the future hold for your future political career?
Well, I hope to continue serving the people of Western Australia in my capacity as an independent senator. I'm yet to learn what are all the incredible issues that, you know, my people in WA are passionate about and what they would like me to address. I don't claim to be an expert in all matters that are impacting people's lives, but my pledge to them is that I will continue serving your interests. I will continue serving what's best for us as a bigger community that's not just nationwide here in Australia, but across the world, to keep fighting for humanity, to keep standing for what's right, and to promote peace and harmony wherever we are.
Senator Payman, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.